Without any further ado, our friend Bill Kristol of the Weekly Standard back with us on the Common Sense Club. Bill, how you been?
Fine, Scott. How are you?
Great. Nice to have you back. So
Good.
I want your analysis first and foremost on where we are today, one day ahead of Michigan and Arizona, and week and some change ahead of Super Tuesday on this presidential race. Are you still thinking there's a possibility somebody comes in, or is the field set? Where are you at?
I think the field's probably set. I think I was the main thing to be said is compared to where we were 2 months ago is, guess what? Mitt Romney is not inevitable. All the people in Washington who ridiculed a lot of us, including me, maybe you too, for saying, hey, let the voters speak, let's have a race. You don't know what's going to happen. Romney may not be as strong as you think. Someone like Santorum might come up. I can't say, I'm not complaining, but I can't say how many people thought I was just crazy, and also they don't like it. You know, they want to determine the shape of the race here, and they don't really like the idea that people across the country get to have a little say here. So it's a real race. I think it's most likely going to be a Romney-Santorum two-man race. I don't quite see how Newt gets back in it, though God knows it's been such a weird year. Anything could happen. Paul stays in, but I don't think he's, really, obviously he's not going to win, and he'll just get his chunk of votes. So I think the most likely outcome is either Romney wins or Santorum wins, honestly. I think it's a lot like Ford Reagan in 76 or Obama Clinton in 2008, just a good two-man race, and I don't think it's going to end tomorrow. I think Santorum could upset Romney in Michigan tomorrow.
You know, what's interesting is that, you talk about how this race has been so volatile, and, you've had people emerge to that number 2 spot and give Romney a battle and then fall out, and then somebody else goes in there and everything else. It seems as though Santorum, after obviously, there was a little bit of the Iowa glow as a result there, and then you had, the Minnesota sweep as well, that with the 3 races that he took that particular time. But he's lasting longer than anybody else has to date in the number 2 spot, hasn't he?
Yeah, I think he doesn't have the real vulnerabilities that some of the others had either, and just not ultimately probably being ready to be president of the United States. That might be the case with Herman Cain or Michelle Bachmann, or in the case of Newt or Rick Perry, certainly being qualified objectively, but turning out in Perry's case to be a bad national candidate. And in Newt's case, I just think there was just too much there probably that weighed him down. Impressive though Newt can be at times. So I think Santorum is an authentic alternative to Romney. He's more of a conservative. Obviously, has been a fighter in the conservative movement for 20 years. People can disagree with individual votes or individual aspects to his conservatism, but you can't question the fact that he's been slugging away here in Washington for 20 years. The Romney campaign wants to turn that against him and say, oh, he's a product of Washington. But I got to say, well, maybe I'm a little more sensitive on this because I'm here in Washington, but I don't know. I don't think it's a real criticism of a guy that he went to Congress and was a senator and worked at a government salary for 16 years and fought pretty hard for conservative ideas. Not that it's a criticism of Romney that he was in the private sector doing his own thing either. So it's an interesting choice, I think, for voters. And I talked to a fair number of people in Michigan this weekend, and Romney's still ahead in the polls, but if I had to bet, I might bet on Santorum squeaking by, which will make next Tuesday, when you guys vote, along with 9 other states, even more exciting.
Will it ever? There was a time in this race when I was really uneasy that we were sort of doing a lot of damage to the brand, if you will, and our chances to ultimately defeat Barack Obama. I've come full circle on that to say this is really good. This is really good. And even if Mitt Romney ends up being the nominee, he'll be a way better nominee as a result of what Rick Santorum, Newt Gingrich, and the others have done for him. But I am also getting to the point where I believe Mitt Romney is getting to the point where he'll have less of a chance against Obama because of how brutal he's been on these others. And what I struggle with, Bill, is whether that's just, hey, that's the way it should be. That's steel on steel, or whether he's crossed the line. Do you think Romney's crossed the line, and or whether or not this alliance with Ron Paul has crossed the line in taking on his opponents that are battling him for the nomination?
I mean, I'm basically with you, Scott. You got to be a little worried about, obviously, all this, effort being spent attacking each other. But I think on the whole, it's a healthy thing. And if you look at the history, there's just not much evidence that these long primaries end up hurting you, and they often do strengthen the candidate. So I'm with you in sort of welcoming the race. And I just think it's healthier for the system. I mean, I think the idea that after everything we've gone through in the last few years, after the failures of the late Bush administration, and then the Tea Party uprising and all the turmoil, which is healthy turmoil for conservatives and Republicans in 2009, 2010, the idea that this race was going to be dictated by some donors and some establishment types in Washington in late 2011, I think was ridiculous and would have backfired. So I'm glad there's a real race. Have Romney's attacks on Santorum and the others got over the line? I don't know. Politics is tough, as Romney likes to say. What does he like to say? It ain't beanbag or something. But quoting that famous comment from a century ago. I do think there's something particularly nasty sometimes about the Romney campaign's attacks. And I've been around politics, and you take things out of context, you take votes out of context, you blast people for things that are kind of trivial. That's all part of politics. There's a way in which the Romney people just go after their opponent, though, personally and in a kind of humorless way, and they use all these surrogates to attack. Maybe it's just effective. Maybe I'm just noticing it because, I kind of bristle a little bit at it. But I just find it's I can't put my finger on it, but it makes me a little more uncomfortable than the typical attacks God knows we've seen over the years, and some pretty rough campaigns in the past. So I sort of agree with your sense that there may be a little bit there that's, and I think it's discomforting to voters who look at Romney and say, look, you got the most money, you got the most support, you ran last time. Of course criticize Rick Santorum for voting for earmarks or for voting for No Child Left Behind or for supporting Arlen Specter. On the other hand, do so with some acknowledgement that you yourself were pro-choice in 2004 at the moment that you're criticizing Rick Santorum for supporting a pro-choice senator, and you yourself supported No Child Left Behind. So
yeah,
really
great
that
point.
Much of a, I just think there's a certain tone in which you can do these things that makes it okay, and another tone in which people look at you and think, God, you're awfully unself-reflective in the way you're making this kind of nasty attacks.
And you made that point very well on the panel Thursday on Fox News with Brett Baer. I mean, my gosh. At least Rick Santorum said, look, I took one for the team, and I apologize. I shouldn't do it. Meanwhile, he's being criticized by a guy who supported it. I mean, it's crazy. I only have a minute left, but I do want to ask you this. We obviously want whoever can defeat Barack Obama. Do you believe in your gut right now, if it is a two-person race, that person is better to be Rick Santorum or Mitt Romney? I have a sense that Rick Santorum can kind of run as a real guy, and that might actually fare better against Obama. What do you think?
The polling suggests they're just about even. I agree, but my instinct is, it's hard to say. I could argue it either way, but if you put a gun at my head, I guess I would prefer to go into it with Santorum standing for middle America with a populist appeal against Obama.
Yeah, it's hard to kind of, you can write the attacks on Romney for the Obama camp. Now, whether they work or not is another thing, and of course, the media's in a tither over some of the social views of Rick Santorum. So you're right, it could go either way. But I think that real guy factor might be the ticket this year. We're going to have to wait and see. Buckle up. Always appreciate your great insight in the work of Weekly Standard. Thanks, Bill. Good talking to you.
Be well.